Imagine for a moment a world without art, without dance, opera, literature, poetry. That world would be a very, very dull place.
Jimmy Mack, an award-winning Chicago area radio professional and freelance audio producer. Throughout his radio career, he has worked on or contributed to shows with the syndicated Howard Stern Show, and he's produced shows on the Loop with celebrity hosts like Styx lead singer Dennis DeYoung, Eagles guitarist Joe Walsh, and Siskel and Ebert, and many, many others. Jimmy is the winner of 2 Chicagoland A.I.R. Awards, 1997's Best On-Air Audience Promotion as a Voice Talent, and in 2001 as Best Midday Show on a talk station as a producer. But Jimmy is also a lifelong Star Wars enthusiast and the creator of the award-winning podcast Rebel Force Radio with co-host Jason Swank. So, Jimmy, want to thank you for joining me today. I cannot wait to pick your mind on Star Wars because, man, you are a plethora of knowledge. I actually just started listening to your guys' show not too long ago, or should I say the variety of shows that you guys have on your website.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, Star Wars is a lot of fun. And with the advent of podcasting, I discovered a great way to combine my 2 passions, radio broadcasting and Star Wars. So I really enjoy doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I don't know, you guys have like such a fresh take on a lot of the material as well. And you kind of delve into, a lot of the things that both new fans and long-term fans can, enjoy and kind of dissect with you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's just such a vast history of Star Wars that there are so many different avenues in which to find discussion and opinion, especially opinion. And we have a lot of time a lot of fun every time we get together and talk about Star Wars on Rebel Force Radio.
Yeah, and I don't know. I guess that's a great place to start because never in the fandom I feel has there been such a division among Star Wars fans as there is right now. And you're someone who goes to cons, talks with dozens and dozens of fans. What's your take on where the Star Wars universe is at right now?
Hmm. Well, it's going through a transitional time. Um, right now, it appears that in 2007, the 8th episode of the Star Wars saga, The Last Jedi,
Mhm.
was intended to push the franchise in a different direction and maybe even invent it a little bit. And that met with a lot of fan pushback. A lot of fans liked it and a lot of fans didn't.
Right.
And so that naturally turned fan against fan in in social media for sure. And it seemed like a lot of people were fighting to be the loudest voice in the room. And I think that's a good thing, actually, because
Yeah.
if you're going to take a franchise that's been around for 40 years and suddenly try to push it in an all new different direction without George Lucas, then I think the fan base should speak up and say, yes, we like this, or no, we don't like this, because it's uncharted territory. Nobody ever said it was going to be easy to continue the Star Wars franchise without George Lucas. And in 2017, we saw how rough it actually could be. And so I think fans expressing their opinions and having conversations about the things they like and don't like is an important thing. So it appears the Disney company listened, and instead of pushing out a new Star Wars film every year, they're going to take a step back and recalibrate and think this thing through, which is something I think they should have done before they even put out their first Disney Lucasfilm movie, which was
Right.
The Force Awakens. I'm thankful for this period right now, this little reset. I think it was necessary. And I think it was necessary not only for the film studio, but for the fan community in general. We need a cooling off period.
Yeah.
And thankfully, we have things like The Mandalorian, which is wonderful and has been a big smash hit with fans. That will fill the void until new films happen in 2022.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that Disney didn't realize what a daunting task that they had before them. I don't think they realized the gravity of the fan base, how dedicated fans are to the franchise, and how passionate people get about it. I mean, primarily when you're dealing with, the original trilogy and, kind of these classical archetypes, like people resonate with that on a deeper level than them because it's almost like modern mythology at that point, right? But I don't think Disney realized that, how nuanced and how well thought out they should have done this trilogy. They were just focused on, cranking out material. And, some of them I thoroughly enjoyed. I love The Mandalorian. I loved Rogue One. I thought Rogue One was probably the best film that Disney had put out. But I don't know. I just don't feel like Disney had a real clear plan for what they wanted to do with the trilogy, though. I mean, I love how The Last Jedi, they tried to subvert expectations. That's what I wanted in that movie. But the fact is, at least from my opinion, they did not do it in a clever or a nuanced way. They kind of didn't realize what the bar was to push. And I don't know. I feel like a lot of it as well was them, just kind of doing away with the original plan because they had received that feedback on how safe The Force Awakens was. So they just subjected everyone's expectations without a plan on where to pick up afterwards.
Well, this could be true. Disney did exert a certain level of control over Lucasfilm during the period when The Force Awakens was being produced, but that turned out to be the biggest all-time domestic box office smash hit. And so with that success, Disney loosened up the apron strings a little bit and let
Huh.
Lucasfilm run a little more independently with the franchise. And the result then was The Last Jedi. And I just think that the biggest place where The Last Jedi missed its mark is it seemed to demystify Star Wars to a certain
Yeah,
degree.
yeah, yeah.
And it took things that I think we consider to be very special and made them seem sort of mundane and dull. And I just didn't think that that was the right direction to push the franchise. And I really don't know where you can take it from there. They have a solid foundation with the George Lucas world building of Star Wars, and I don't think the wheel needs to be reinvented so much as expanded upon. Let's find different uses for it, as opposed to trying to make it something different altogether.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like there was a little bit of, I don't want to say disrespect for the fandom when it comes to what they chose to subvert and what they chose to change. But I mean, when you have, people who have been working on this franchise for 30 years, telling you or giving you feedback, right, that a direction that you're taking a character is at its core, at its core goes against the value tenets of that character, you got to listen and you have to take that into account because I mean, you're talking about folks who have been, in the Star Wars fandom, going to conventions, interacting with fans on a daily basis for 30 years. Like nobody is more in touch with the fan base than the folks who have been in it that long.
Right. But it just appeared that a new approach was being taken, and so the voices were shut out. Be it the regular Joe Schmo fan like you and me, all the way up to Mark Hamill himself, who put up some debate with Ryan Johnson when it came to the way his character was going to be portrayed in The Last Jedi, and he was basically told to put up or shut up.
Yeah.
Um, or shut up and put up. I don't know what he was told, but they told him to deal with it. And
Yeah,
Mark
just
was
drink
right.
that kitty milk and do it.
But Mark was right. Mark, I mean, it just seems to me kind of selfish to take a franchise and make it the vision of the latest popular quirky auteur. That doesn't fit into the big picture as far as I'm concerned. And I just think that a lot of the wrong voices were at the table over this 5-year period here while Star Wars films have been being produced. Now, that being said, I don't think that it's been a disaster at all. I mean, there's a lot of merits in the sequel trilogy that I think, I'm one of the rare guys who really liked The Rise of Skywalker. I really liked it. I just thought it was fun. And, but
Had a
people are
lot of
looking for something more, they're looking for something more. And the plot holes, I'm not blind to things like plot holes or, quick fixes that might have happened in that film. But then it's just the end result of, as you were saying earlier, not really well thought out and fleshed out plans. So I
Right.
think they're paying the price for that. I really do. The toys aren't selling. Interest level in Star Wars has been down, since the glory days of The Force Awakens. And I find that to be very unfortunate. And I think that's the result of too much too fast, really. As Star Wars fans, we're used to waiting. We're used to having those periods of downtime between the movies where the story and mythology really gestate within the fan base, and we make it something bigger than it is.
Yeah.
That's why I think the fan base is so important to the popularity of Star Wars, that it really is this. I think it really should be a back and forth process between the filmmakers and the fans, because we're dealing with something that's been around for 40 plus years, and a lot of fans have taken ownership of Star Wars. And you can debate until you're blue in the face whether that's right or wrong. The bottom line is it's the fact.
Right.
And I think that Disney Lucasfilm needs to adapt to that a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd really like to see the Lucas cut of Rise of Skywalker, just because I guess they have like a 4.5 hour cut that was just all the different things thrown together, and I'd really like to see some of the alternative cuts, because they reshot a good portion of that movie 2-3 times, and then they were brought back for a fourth, I believe.
Well, I'm not really sure about that because they're so quiet about it. They're so secretive about it.
Yeah.
Um, George Lucas was consulted by J.J. Abrams going into Episode 9. They met and maybe exchanged some notes and everything, but I don't really know how much they would have followed his actual guidance as far as the final cuts and all things like that. There are rumors that J.J. Abrams had a cut and then the studio went and changed it around a lot. I think there's some merit in that. I think there's some truth to that. It just, to me, it seemed like everyone from the fans to the director, J.J. Abrams, to the actors themselves, everyone just seemed very relieved when the sequel trilogy came to an end.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
oh my God, we survived it. But the results were mixed, and fans have been very, very critical about that.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to the age-old debate of quality versus quantity, right? Like you're saying, too much, too fast. When you rush out a product, just thinking like an assembly line, it's going to be, less of a quality product than something that's handmade, and someone puts the time and dedication into making and sculpting a unique thing. But I don't know. I feel like there was just a push for the merchandising, and the merchandising is really where it started falling off, and really when Disney decided to go in this new direction. So let me ask you. There's a lot of rumors going around about what the post sequel Disney universe will look like. Everything from they're gonna uncanonize it, which I don't believe is is any direction they're gonna want to go. Because of course Disney's not going to admit they ever did anything wrong, but there's a lot of rumors circulating out there. So what's your take on a lot of that stuff?
Well, I think we'll be looking closely at eras of Star Wars. What era is the one that's most fertile ground for telling quality Star Wars stories? I think fan reaction to original trilogy era Star Wars is
Mhm.
where it's at. I think that's where it all works. But then you run into these issues where the storytellers and filmmakers get boxed in the weight. They have to carry the weight of the history of the whole thing,
Right.
and so they run into issues where they contradict previous storylines and things like that. I still think it can be negotiated. I think if you can pick something within that era and make a great Star Wars story. Um, the other thing is following the Skywalker story. When George Lucas started using terminology like the chosen one in things like the prequels, it's like that's a tough act to follow.
Yeah.
You're talking about like the coming of the Messiah here. That's really big headline news in the Star Wars universe. What do you do for a second act? That's the thing. How do you follow that?
Yeah.
What in a way that we're going to care? So there are definitely some big hurdles to be overcome when bringing back Star Wars. But I think we'll be looking at something maybe outside of the eras we're familiar with, outside of the original trilogy era, outside of the sequel trilogy era, maybe something like ancient Star Wars, the
Yeah.
origin of the Jedi, stories like that we've heard whispers about over the years, where did the Jedi come from? Things like that. That
Yeah.
could be interesting territory to get into, as long as it's more than just about plot. It's more than just about unveiling history. You have to have great characters in there too, and the
Yeah.
characters have to have great chemistry together. So it's a tall order, but those are pretty big ingredients of the Star Wars stew that I think they're going to have to give a shot. And so that's what I anticipate. Taika Waititi is directing a film that comes out in 2022. And that is really going to be pushing Star Wars into whatever the future direction is. And will it be a Star Wars that has those familiar tropes like TIE fighters, X-Wings, and lightsabers? Or is it going to be something entirely different? I'm kind of leaning toward the entirely different. But then you get into territory like, well, if they're going to do something entirely different, why did they purchase the Star Wars license or the Star Wars IP to begin with?
Right.
If they can't do something with the existing IP, why did they buy it in the first place? Just to have the name Star Wars to slap on any old thing? These
Yeah.
are the challenges that we face when looking toward the future of Star Wars as a fan base. And it's exciting and scary at the same time.
Yeah, I think that the reason why they purchased Star Wars to begin with, they saw the merchandising potential because that's what Disney's about is merchandising. But as you were, saying just kind of the weight of Star Wars history and lore, I mean, I think one of the biggest problems that Disney kind of had was how they threw out a lot of the expanded universe, and I hope going forward that they'll use that as an anchor point for their own stories and what they want to tell. Because man, I would love to see a trilogy of movies just about the Knights of the Old Republic. I'd love to see a trilogy covering like the Jedi Mandalorian War. That would
Mhm.
be phenomenal. Just imagine like the action scenes that you could have with that. But I mean, just like even if they're gonna like focus on the era, following the fall of the Empire, like they did with the Mandalorian, like keeping it rooted with that the 30 years following that took place in the comics, I think would do a lot better to kind of reconnecting them with what Star Wars lore should be.
Yeah, and I think they'll be exploring these different eras, be it in the films or on a TV series or what have you. I think the films are a more likely option for that kind
Yeah,
of, delving into ancient times and stuff. But yeah, I like those ideas a lot. And I think there's a lot that can be done with it. But you have to have more than a premise. You have to have great characters. You have to give those characters purpose.
yeah,
That's a big problem that I have with the current day of novels, of Star Wars novels. You mentioned the expanded universe, and a lot of us look fondly back at those books, but they weren't perfect. They were hit or miss. We
yeah,
knew it,
absolutely.
but it seemed like that they had a cohesiveness to them. It seemed like they had a purpose, that the stories had a reason for happening. from book to book. You would get these 9-book series. And, maybe that was overkill, maybe not. But at least everything was working together. With the current state of Star Wars books, it's just a bunch of one-offs, one-shots that are very heavily character focused and don't really lead you to any big conclusions at all. It just
Right.
is like a day in the life of Grand Admiral Thrawn almost. Here's an adventure he has, but it doesn't affect the big picture. It's character, yes, but story thin. The plot is thin. And you have to have strong characters and strong stories to tell strong Star Wars. And if one of them are missing, then it just feels like sort of phoned in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so with the old expanded universe, you had a connective tissue between all of those stories, and you could watch the characters grow in those processes, like Jason and Jaina Solo, and then their younger brother Anakin, and all of those other famous expanded universe characters, everyone from like the Both and Borsk Fela to Grand Admiral Thrawn, whose story was already told in a nice compact trilogy,
Mhm.
and they keep bringing him back because they think that like Timothy Zahn can't write any other character or something. I don't know, but he was Grand Admiral Thrawn's return in the Rebels animated series was very well received. So they keep pumping out Grand Admiral Thrawn novels. But I noticed that none of these new novels affect the big picture of the mythology. They seem like very specific, like a day in the life of sort of
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
And I have trouble investing my time in those. And so I would love to see more expanded universe elements being brought in, like they've done with Thrawn. It's kind of hard to do without contradicting a lot of things too, though. So you have to be careful. Maybe we'll see some characters get reinvented, like a Mara Jade. We haven't seen her show up in years. And I know George Lucas wasn't personally too fond of that character, but the fan base was. And
Yeah.
there could be ways to bring her back and make
Why
her,
didn't Lucas like her?
because George didn't like the idea of Luke settling down.
Okay.
Um, Mara Jade sort of came on the scene when George hadn't finished really defining what a Jedi Knight was.
Hmm.
And he went on to do that in the prequel trilogy.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then after he did the prequels, he completely gave up the idea of doing any sequel to Star Wars. And so I think George had a hang up about the expanded universe in general that expanded on Luke's story past Return of the Jedi. See,
Right.
he knew something the Disney company didn't know, that it's a real hard thing to do to continue the story after Return of the Jedi. At
It's the
least according
perfect
to him.
ending. It's the perfect ending. I mean,
It's a great ending. But you still want to know what happened after they were done partying on Endor that night. You want to
yeah.
know, what did Luke do the next day? What did Leia do? And I would love to see an animated series expand on that a little bit. But they're going with the Bad Batch now, which seems like that's a direct spin-off from Clone Wars. And it could be very interesting because it's going to get into that dark period of time when the Empire is ruling the galaxy. And it'll be a nice bridge, I think, between the Clone Wars animated show and Star Wars Rebels. I
Yeah.
don't know if you watch the animated series and everything.
I've not had a chance to watch Rebels yet, but I absolutely loved Clone Wars when it came out. I thought that was probably some of the best writing in Star Wars. And while we were talking about the expanded universe too, I feel like the newer expanded universe, they want to put out something quality, but it just never hits. I haven't really read the novels too much, but I was an avid comic book reader. I read all the Dark Horse stuff growing up. And I picked up, when Marvel started their new Star Wars series, a lot of it started off so good. I mean, I remember it was, I forget which issue of the Vader series, he's just surrounded by, dozens of, rebel fighters. And, they just say, you're surrounded. And he says, by nothing but fear and dead men. And then he just goes off and just starts mass murdering them all. And so it started out like real fresh and exciting, and I was hopeful about where they would take that, but then a couple years in, all those series just started to peter off into mediocrity, and it just really doesn't hold a candle to some of the dark horse stuff that had come in the past.
The second Darth Vader series, it started in 2015 by Charles Soule,
Yeah,
is that's highly recommended. Some of the better Star Wars comic book writing of all time. I mean, it's just such a great story. You got to check it out because Vader's dealing with it's post Revenge of the Sith, obviously, and he's dealing with his new normal,
right.
you know. And he's just like us. He didn't like wearing a mask either, but he had to. And so he deals with that, and it gets really out there too, with some force visions he has, and this Sith artifact. It's a mask from a dead Sith Lord, but it's possessed by the essence of the dead Sith Lord, and so Vader deals with the discovery of that mask and the powers that it contains, and it makes him very introspective with the Force and everything. It's fabulous. And it's a whole series, I mean, of stories. It just um it's a great, they show elements of Order 66 with Vader hunting down Jedi, and
Yeah,
it's really, really well done. So I have to recommend that to you. You can check it out on the Marvel Unlimited app if you're into that thing. And all the old Dark Horse stories are on that Marvel Unlimited app too.
yeah.
I, I don't know if you're like me, but I have boxes and boxes, the long boxes, the white long boxes filled with those
Still
old
have a
Dark
bu-
Horse comics in my attic.
I still have a bunch of those too.
It's just so much easier to punch open an app on my iPad and read them there, as opposed to going up into the attic and finding the bagged comic and everything. So yeah, anytime technology helps me replace physical media, I'm always very grateful, because I'm someone who's traveled my whole life with lots of physical media, be it from vinyl to VHS to you name it. I have all formats. I mean, I could just reach up and grab anything. Like here you go, DAT tapes. When was the last time you saw a DAT tape? Okay, I got crates of them in my house. Are you kidding me? Here's one. Here's one. Cassette tape. Remember the cassette tape? And you
Oh
probably
man,
don't. I got tons.
I still got a cassette player in my car, man. I got to use I got my little cassette aux cord that I plug my phone into.
Oh, wow.
So
Would
yeah, I
have ever
still got
thought
some
we'd
old
be
school.
plugging phones into those. But yeah, so anytime I could take physical media out of my life, because I've been with radio shows where we've had to, back in the 90s before everything was digitized,
Yeah.
we'd have to ship road boxes filled with physical media to different states and everything. It was
Oh
just
wow.
insanity. It was total insanity. So I don't mind. I'm so happy and thankful for the digital age. I used to have to, or like college days, moving in and out of college and stuff, boxes of vinyl, boxes of CDs and cassettes. It's like, boy, man, if you told me I'd be able to fit all that in my pocket someday.
It would have been a game changer.
Yeah, oh my God, would it? And it would have saved me a lot of time in my youth that I could have wasted more wisely.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
more on events and things than actual things, you know what I mean?
we're just wasting it, just wasting time. I was expert level at wasting time when I was in my 20s, expert level. But I
So
was too busy to do it. I was too busy to display my talents.
yeah.
So, go figure that out.
So I guess let me ask you, like, I mean, it's been a radical shift, from where when you started in radio to this age now, where I mean, really podcasting's kind of taken over. What do you think was I don't know, kind of special about you being able to watch that transition over time?
Oh, that's a good question. Because at first, when I started hearing about podcasting, I was snobby about it. I'm like, oh, That's amateur hour. I'm a broadcaster. That's for amateurs, you know. Um, but it didn't take me long to discover the flexibility and freedom that podcast gives you. And I'm a production guy. I love to just be in a work with sounds and
Yeah.
edit sounds and make new sounds and things like that. I'm a studio rat ever since I was a kid, ever since I was 18. I was, just always in the studio. And the podcasting really gave me an opportunity to do whatever I wanted with the audio medium. And then to find a way to connect it to Star Wars, it was really interesting how I came to that. In 2005, I did a production for CBS Radio to get on board the hype train with the Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
I was supposed to do it for Attack of the Clones. So I traveled actually 3 years prior to this. I traveled to Indianapolis. Me and my brother Billy Mack drove out there, and we secured a bunch of interviews with Star Wars celebrities, thinking that we'd be able to use it on this radio show that I had been given a casual green light to produce. But in between the uh, the few weeks of me returning and getting ready to produce it, the program director who gave me that casual green light left the company. And he was replaced with a guy who did not like me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I didn't even approach him about this. Hey, I got this Star Wars thing that the other guy said I could do. I just didn't do it. Fast forward 3 years later, and episode 3 is going to come out. The same guy who left the company before, he came back in the same role. And I was like, well, thank God that other guy hated me. But so this guy's back. And I was like, oh, congrats. I'm so happy you're back. Can I do that Star Wars show you said I could do? He's like, what Star Wars show? And so I explained it to him. And he's like, yeah, go have fun. Do whatever you're going to do. So I went to Indianapolis again for the next Star Wars convention. And so I already had interviews that I had secured 3 years earlier. And then I got a bunch of fresh stuff at this new convention. And I put it all together into an hour-long show.
Yeah.
And so that was like essentially my very first Star Wars podcast, but it was on the radio. But I just love doing it so much. And I was sitting in the studio editing those interviews and making radio bumpers and IDs with Star Wars sound effects. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm doing it. That was the first thing. I couldn't believe I was actually doing it. And the second one was, I want to do more. I
Yeah.
want to do more of this. But you get your opportunity, the hour plays, it's done, it's over with, and I was just trying to figure out a way to keep riding that wave. And a few months went by. Actually, a year went by. And they had announced that there was going to be another Star Wars celebration in LA in 2007. And I was like, oh, this is so exciting. I'm going to go and, what, I'm going to get interviews and then do what with them, right?
Yeah.
But I was still going to do it anyway, just because it was such a good thing for me to do that one year when I went and got the interviews and couldn't use them for anything. So I'm like, well, I'll just try again. Maybe I will get the opportunity if I just do it. And I kept seeing this thing about a podcast at theforce.net. And I didn't have time to listen to it because I always wanted to work on the radio shows I was working on. And when I would drive home, I would listen to our afternoon drive show. And I had an incentive to listen to that afternoon drive show because my wife was a co-host on that show. So I would always want to listen to that. She was going to have a knee surgery at the end of 2005, 2006, something like that. And so she was off the air for a few weeks.
Yeah.
And I was gonna go see her at the hospital. I was gonna pick up my kids and then drive them back into the city to see her at the hospital. And I didn't have any way to listen to a podcast. I didn't even have an iPod. So I burned a CD of the podcast hosted by Jason Swank and Pete Nadel, and I listened to it. I remember that night I was listening to it in my car on a CD, and I was like, "These guys are pretty good. Okay, I see what they're doing here. Okay," and so I kept burning CDs and listening to this podcast, binging it while I was driving my kids back and forth into the city to see their mom, who was in the hospital for a few days.
Mhm.
By the end of that week, it just hit me like a bolt of lightning. Like, I got to help these guys out. I hear what they're trying to do, but they're not quite at that level. And I
Right.
can help them get to that level. And I thought it would be cool to do because I was really starting to enjoy their show and the chemistry between these two guys and everything. And I just wanted to make their show sound better. So it was a better listening experience for me as a listener. That's all I wanted to do was help them out.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to theforce.net and I dealt with their content manager and not the guys. And he sort of just said, okay, well, you can work with them. He sort of just pushed me off on them.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, this isn't going to go well. These guys are going to be resistant because they've been podcasting for a few months. And it was, they were starting to build some momentum and getting their feet on the ground and everything. And then all of a sudden I come in and I'm going to show them how to do it, big shot
Yeah.
radio guy,
Yeah.
right? But in all reality, I was a fan of theirs, and I just wanted to contribute so I would know people at the convention in LA in a few months. I thought it would be cool just to walk up to a table and be like, "Hey, I'm Jimmy Mack. Well, nice to meet you." That's all I thought it would be.
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
that would be neat. And there was a little bit of resistance from the guys as far as my helping them out. But that ice thawed pretty fast, and by the time we were hanging out in LA together a few months later, we realized that we were really hitting it off well, and that was the beginning of, a really long and fruitful relationship, where I was just kind of like in the background, doing what I do, playing with sounds, hanging out in the studio, and letting those guys do their thing and enjoying the show.
Yeah.
And then about 2 years later, Pete Nadel, he said he was going to leave the show, go start a family. And I tried to encourage Jason to keep doing the show by himself because I was a fan and I enjoyed the show. And he never asked me, but just one time we tried to talk Pete out of it. It didn't look like he was going to budge. And I was starting to contribute more and more to the show anyway.
Mhm.
As far as doing a lot of celebrity interviews. I had my own Star Wars music show on the feed and everything. And so I think I just suggested to Jason, well, I can sit in for Pete once he leaves. And we decided we just wouldn't make any announcements about it or anything because Jason and Pete, that was a very popular thing. Pete was a very popular guy with the fan base and everything. And they were really making a strong connection. And so I thought it would be bad if we made some big announcement, Pete's replacement or anything like that.
Yeah.
We didn't say anything. Pete said goodbye. We gave him a big farewell. And then the show came back the next week and I was the co-host. And it was good that we didn't make that announcement because I think the force.net sort of, they wanted to have more control over all of that and have more say maybe, but they weren't being proactive at all as far as finding a replacement for Pete. And I just slotted myself in there. We just started doing shows and the listeners seemed to like it. And by the time the management at TFN started asking any questions, we had already established ourselves as the new podcast duo. So, and then that went on for a few years. And then when Disney acquired the franchise and it looked like, there was going to be lots more new films, a whole new era of Star Wars was starting. I knew that the number of Star Wars podcasts would go from a handful to a truck full,
Oh yeah.
a semi full, it went from like a dozen podcasts to all of a sudden overnight, like 500 to 1,000 podcasts as it is today. There's probably somewhere in that ballpark, 500 Star Wars podcasts out there you can choose from.
Easily.
And And so I knew that was going to happen, and I really thought it would be a good opportunity for us to break loose from TFN and go totally independent. And it was just time for the little chick to fly out of the nest, and so we did, and it's been great. It's been Rebel Force Radio ever since then. This 14 years later. This September it'll be 14 years of nonstop Star Wars podcasting from Jason Swank and myself. My actual anniversary is in December because I came into the party a little later after Wendy had the knee surgery and all that.
Yeah.
But that's how it all happened, and so we just keep trucking along, and it's sort of a weird period right now because we don't have any films on the horizon, and we're really hyper focused on The Mandalorian right now, and I like it because it takes me back a little bit to those early years when we were doing the show for TFN. There was no Star Wars going on then either. It was after Revenge of the Sith and before the Clone Wars TV show came out.
Right.
So they're just, we just have to not rely so much on breaking news of the week and all that, but just talk Star Wars and share our passions and our observations and talk about the stories that already exist. And so those were interesting times that I think really got us prepared to doing podcasts now, where there's more Star Wars news than there was back then by far, but it's just kind of a nice quiet little time right now, and I think it's a good time to be introspective as a Star Wars fan too, and really appreciate the Star Wars that exists, the Star Wars that is, as opposed to constantly debating over the Star Wars that isn't, aka why did George Lucas make the prequels about a kid, or why is Rey so strong with the Force without being trained? Things like that. That's minor stuff. Look at the big picture, I think, and that's what's good about this sort of period of downtime while the franchise is resetting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's. I think you made the right move because the greatest benefit of a podcast as opposed to working in a radio station, as I'm sure you will attest, is creative control, being able to have your own voice, being able to say what you want. I feel like, if you would have stuck at like force.net, primarily if you had negative things to say, they may have had notes for you on that.
There were times. I know. I mean, I can confirm that because, during those years we were there for 6 years, we would occasionally get notes, and it was never pretty. It was never pretty, but you hear them out and then you just do what you do. I mean, that's how we do it in radio.
Yeah.
You hear them out and then you just get on the air and do what you always do. But yeah, the freedom that podcasts give you, and just the fact that radio is so big as far as a corporate run industry, it's very frustrating, and you really just feel like, very unimportant at the end of the day. You don't feel like you're working for the greater good of your career a lot of times. You're working for the greater good of the corporation or someone else's career. With podcasts, we all become our own radio station owners and managers and talent. I mean, the whole thing, we can do everything. And I get a lot of fulfillment out of that because doing it professionally for so many years, I was in radio, I'm able to see all the different ways that a radio station or even a radio show itself works. I've been able to see all the inner mechanisms of them. And so it's given me the opportunity to do a lot of things that I always knew I could do, but never had the opportunity to do in the business I'm in, because I got pigeonholed as an audio production guy, which is fine because that's what I am. But what if I want to engineer a show? What if I want to promote a show and market a show? What if I want to be, the sales rep for the show? Yeah, I get to do all of that stuff with podcasting. And to me, that's really very fulfilling. And I firmly believe that the new history of radio is with these crazy podcasts.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost like that era. Just to kind of jump back to last week, I was talking with 42nd Street Pete. He was like a grindhouse historian.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that era right when the Hayes Code went down, when studios could no longer own their own theaters. So you had all these independent theaters opened up, which created a wave of independent films that eventually redefined Hollywood with, like, Jaws, Star Wars would be another example. And I feel like that's the same way with podcasting, is that now you're opening the floodgates with a new medium, and all these independent voices are going to come in, and they're going to redefine what that medium is and how it operates.
And then you also see radio talents, great talent who's been put on the sidelines
Yeah.
because of corporate business practices and what have you. Radio really operates on the cheap these days. And so that forces out a lot of big talent, the talent who hasn't been able to really take control of their own careers. And so a lot of them are now looking at podcasting a little more seriously. Because there's still that prevailing attitude that I mentioned at the beginning of the show. Oh, podcast. I'm a professional. That's amateur hour. My kids podcast. You
Right.
know, sure, everyone can get a show, but to me, I think it's harder to succeed in podcasting than it is on radio, because you don't have all of the support structure in place. We have to fight tooth and nail to get publicity, to get advertising dollars, to get visibility as a podcast. We have to fight tooth and nail. Radio stations buy billboards, they buy TV commercials, they
Yeah.
they have promotion departments, they have marketing departments, they have salespeople. Again, you do it all yourself. It's DIY when it comes to podcasting. And with so many different people in the arena, I mean, anyone can make a podcast today, right now, without any hangups, without any roadblocks, and so it becomes a very crowded environment, which is great because it offers tons of variety. But it also makes it very hard to create a sustainable thing if you're really looking to take it to the next level. If you're looking at it as a business,
Mhm.
then you might find a lot of frustration, even if you are someone who had massive amounts of success in broadcast radio. You might find your kids' podcast is getting more hits than yours. These are tough things for people to get over mentally, I think, after having those radio careers and learning how to do it that one way,
Yeah.
that established industry way. You have to reinvent yourself. And right now it's like, the pioneers we're beyond the point where the pioneers have had to fight for their land, and now we're settling and we're creating our own little towns and villages and stuff, and some of them are, you know Skid Row, and some of them are, you know Times Square. So we have to figure out how to how to succeed in such a crowded on such a crowded playing field now, but it can be done.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think a lot of that also is that, like, if you're a big broadcaster and you're moving in, you do have a lot going for you, because you should have an established fan base at that point, and that with the right advertising and the right marketing of yourself,
Yeah,
you definitely regain that fan base real quick.
yeah.
But I think what a lot of folks struggle with podcasting, and I'll say I attest to that as well, is finding what niche makes your podcast unique and worth listening to. Now, that's the one thing I will praise you guys for, is you found a niche fandom that really loves to engage with new content, new perspectives on things.
Mhm.
So finding that community that you could kind of establish your little town in, that is, I think that's what a lot of folks struggle trying to get theirs off the ground.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, I appreciate you saying that. That's pretty astute, because Star Wars fans do like to contribute,
Yeah.
and they do like to be a part of the process. That goes back to what we were saying earlier before about fans voicing their displeasure or pleasure with something from Star Wars. I think it's important to let these guys know how we would prefer to see it. Um, I think those, is a fan base that we've always had a good relationship with Star Wars, the fans and the creators. It always seems like it's been pretty good. Even back in the George Lucas days. Sure, he was aloof and everything, but he also understands the nature of being a fan. George does. He grew up a big fan of comic books and things like that. So much so he even bought a comic book store back in the 70s in New York.
Yeah.
Um, so he gets what it's like to be a fan, and so does Mark Hamill. Um, so there's not that professional wall, but I have a feeling the wall is going to become a more tangible thing moving forward, just because of social media
Yeah.
and how loud the voices get. Um, I could see that. I mean, it's like in professional sports, the ball players, they strike out and they get booed and the crowd yells at them and everything. You think they don't want to hit a home run? Of course they do. That's what they want to do, but they have to hear it when they fail. That's all part of being a professional. And either you're going to let those boos intimidate you and push you away, or you're going to feed off of that and use it as a wake-up call and let you
Yeah.
know that you have to put in those extra hours of batting practice tomorrow morning. That kind of back and forth is pretty cool, and I like that. Um, and I forgot why we started talking about it. Oh no, but you had said that. Okay, yeah. You had said that Star Wars fans they like to engage and be involved, and I'm very thankful that we have the type of approach that has been able to connect with a big portion of the Star Wars fan base. So
Yeah.
that's been very fulfilling. I've made lifelong friends. Like, yeah, right here, we're becoming buddies right in front of everyone here, and just because of Star Wars. So I'll take it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, man. There's just something that's so valuable about Star Wars on a cultural level is that I mean, though, you can make the same argument that it is as divisive as it is unifying, but it's a unifying thing, man. Like there's something about a fandom that even if you're of a political differences, right? And particularly in today's day and age when everybody's just at each other's throat, there's just something about Star Wars that can unify people together because it's it's an old mythology that's told in a way that it has modern day values. You know what I mean? Like these are timeless stories that are being told, but like, the battle against tyranny and oppression or uniformity, right? If you want to look at it more abstractly, that's something that kind of unites people because we all want to be individuals and we all want to contribute our perceptions onto things.
George Lucas, when he was developing Star Wars, opened himself up to all sort of different methods of storytelling throughout history.
Yeah.
And he looked at everything from the Bible to Shakespeare to Greek mythology, to Buddhism, I mean, all kind of different things. And that led him to start reading Joseph Campbell stuff. And of course,
Yeah.
Joseph Campbell was a
Hero of
scholar.
a Thousand Faces.
Right. And he studied all of that stuff and went on college lecture circuits and became very well known as someone who was truly like the godfather of myth making. Campbell was able to boil it all down, everything from the old telling stories around a fire in the caveman days to uh, organized religion and
Yeah.
things of that aspect. And Campbell would in all of this mythology and stuff, and Campbell would be able to pluck all of the things that made these stories appeal to mass audiences throughout time. Have that universal appeal. Why do these stories get passed on from generation to generation? What is it about them? And so he would take cultures from opposite ends of the world and study them and recognize that they would share these universal elements that appealed to the human nature.
Yeah.
And so George started studying that stuff. and put it all into a blender and came up with Star Wars. And of course, George also very heavily studied the films of the past. Um, it was all part of his world building process, such to the point that Joseph Campbell actually once referred to Lucas as his best student, because he was actually able to take what Campbell was discovering about the modern myth and storytelling throughout history and actually apply it in such a perfect way, which George did with Star Wars. I think that's pretty cool.
Well, I mean, Lucas was, and Joseph Campbell, they were also a big fan of Carl Jung. And what makes Carl Jung special in the psychology world is that he kind of takes this hero's journey and he puts it into this process called individuation, right? To where, you know, the importance of these myths is that you project your journey onto it. And I think what's so universal, like, let's just say the first story, for example, or the A New Hope, uh, you start off with, you know, this character Luke Skywalker, who's young, naive, unsure of himself in a chaotic world, right? And we've all been there in some point in time in our life. We've all felt unsure of ourselves, unsure of who we should be, right? And you know, we go on, we find, you know, this wise teacher, this mentor that kind of teaches us how to find that spark of individuality in ourselves and kind of blossom that and allow that to become the confidence that, you know, we use to, you know, take down the empire, find a circle of friends that we can be ourselves, right? And I think that's the beauty of Star Wars, is that it works in a way that you can project your life story onto it, and you can find a sense of fulfillment or purpose every time you watch it and engage with it.
It has that universal appeal. There's
Yeah.
something in there. There are elements in the story. It might be the whole story. It might be just one little part of the story, but there's something in there that is going to appeal to your base, um, to your basic likes, you know,
Yeah.
and it's going to resonate with you in a way because it appeals to that element of your personal human nature. For me, it's a lot of the story has to do with Luke, the relationship with the father, all that
Yeah.
stuff, you know. I'm not
Yeah.
saying my dad was Darth Vader, but I mean, it's just it's a certain way of breaking down um, the fundamentals of human relationship in a super fantastic, amazing way.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that borderlines on absurdity sometimes, but you can still pick apart those elements that will appeal to your human nature and everything that's educated you up to the point when you actually see the film. You know, you see yourself in a lot of the characters.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I mean, that's also like a classic trope of Greek tragedies, right?
Yeah.
You know, struggle between father and son, or the struggle of, you know, one generation passing the torch to the next, how one generation's values become the next generation's, you know, fears, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I mean, just like all the little nuances that Lucas added when he wrote the original trilogy, like Vader's just German for father, right? So
Yeah. Right.
he's just a he's just that dark father figure, or the perversion of the king archetype, if you want to get Jungian with it. But I don't know. I feel like that's probably. I feel like it's a good thing that this kind of period of like calm was the last thing that we got was The Mandalorian, because out of all the Disney productions, The Mandalorian feels the most like the old trilogy, and it feels the most like it was made by fans.
Yeah. Well, at least made by guys who really understand the tone and vibe of Star Wars.
Right, right.
And that has the it reeks of the American Western.
Oh,
It reeks of the Italian Western. It's just it has those great elements to it. And also it has a vibe that kind of takes me back to some 80s TV shows too, a little bit. Um, without being too obnoxious about it. Um, Wow, they threw a bunch of stuff into that mix and really came up with a winning recipe. Uh, when you just think about, the absurd notion of a baby Yoda, I mean, this stuff on paper, I don't think would have sold us as much as actually seeing it for ourselves. But Boba Fett knockoff goes in search of Baby Yoda. But I mean, there's just so much fresh going on, surrounded by so much familiar.
Right.
And that is something that I wish the sequel trilogy would have embraced a little more, giving us some of those more familiar locales, like the Mandalorian going back to Mos Eisley and Tatooine, or having a battle on foot against a Jawa sandcrawler. You know, those are familiar things, but it's put in this fresh new package, and it just is so well done. And I think that fans react so much to it is because it really has such a solid foot in the original trilogy look and feel.
Yeah.
Classic aliens, um, just something about the pacing of it really resembles the old uh, spaghetti westerns, the Enrico Morricone, Clint Eastwood films. Um, Morricone, he was the composer. Who was the guy who
Oh,
directed?
Sergio Leone.
Sergio. Yes, of course, of course. Um, those have been actually on our TV sets a lot lately. I think my youngest son, he's 17, and I think he started getting into classic westerns thanks to Red Dead Redemption.
Oh yeah, that was a
Because
great game.
he spends a lot of time playing that game and a lot of time watching movies, and he loves classic cinema. So it just was natural for him to then find the Man with No Name movies and stuff like that. So I've been
Yeah.
catching bits and pieces of those old films a lot lately, and seeing them now after watching season 1 of The Mandalorian multiple times, I really can see where they're mining
Yeah.
for some of the vibe and pacing and tone of The Mandalorian. And I really hope they're able to hold on to that in season 2, because there's so many rumors about season 2 now. Ahsoka's going to be in it. Boba Fett's going to be it. I just don't want it again to get weighed down by
Yeah.
its history, because season 1 felt so fresh, so familiar, but yet so fresh. I worry then if you start going beyond just environments and things like that and start incorporating characters we already know. Now we have to deal with the entire history of the Clone Wars animated series because Ahsoka is going to show up, or we have
Right.
to deal with everything having to do with Boba Fett and his history. And while it could be really well done, it could also be really distracting and take the momentum of this show and put it in jeopardy. I'm banking on it being a success, but it's just fun to talk about it while we're waiting for the next season to start.
Yeah.
It's okay to talk about the things you're looking forward to seeing. I think it's also okay to talk about some of the things you might have reservations about, and that's the kind of fan discussion that I like to have. And unfortunately, some people get so put off by you saying anything critical about Star Wars that they'll then start attacking you
Yeah. Yeah.
in certain ways. But maybe we're getting past that level of either you're with me or you're my enemy. Hopefully we're getting past all of that and getting back into a time when Star Wars fans could have open and honest discourse and criticisms and complaints without having to worry about being attacked for a million different other reasons that have nothing to do with Star Wars. So
Right.
but it happens, folks. We all have social media accounts. We all see it. We all participate in it, or we've been victim of it, or whatever you want to call it. But it's been very prevalent, and we're still here. So we're still here. We're still talking Star Wars. So
Yeah.
let's just keep the ball rolling, I say.
Well, I mean, and that's another thing I'd like to point out, as you mentioned the Western, is that just from a writing perspective, how difficult it is to merge sci-fi and Western elements, because usually, a Western being in a historic period in time, it kind of butts heads with other genres like that, which is why you usually see Westerns have more like fantasy elements, more cultish type stuff when you
Mm.
get into those subgenres, horror as well. But when you find that perfect balance between Western elements and sci-fi elements, you look at like Westworld as a prime example, right? You
Mhm.
do it in a fresh, inventive way. It really reinvents, what Western genre could be in modern society. And they just look at it in the video game genre. You brought your son into it, and he probably had never even thought about, watching old Westerns. I hope he's gotten into some of the John Fords as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. I know he's seen The Searchers at least.
Oh, the Searchers
Um,
is the
and
best.
I don't know if he's seen any others. But yeah, he was definitely more into the Clint Eastwood stuff.
Yeah.
That's the most recent. Um, Also, I've noticed our DVR has been filled up with many episodes of Bonanza. So,
Oh man. Oh, he's
so
going deep cut. I like it.
yeah, yeah. So he's all in. He reads about it and gets really into discovering what it's all about. And with social distancing happening this summer, he's really been taking advantage of the downtime to get caught up on a lot of movies. He's also been
Yeah.
watching the old Universal horror films, the classics.
Oh yeah. Oh,
His old,
everything until the Invisible Man returns is pretty good.
oh, okay, that's when they jumped the shark. I
Oh
didn't
yeah.
know there was a shark jumping point for Universal movies, but it makes sense.
I believe that, and you know what? I can't even say. I think the like the jumping the shark moment when it was a good idea was the Invisible Agent, when he was like a World War II agent who like drops in and like steals papers from Nazis and stuff. Like fantastic premise, but like after that point is when those movies start to get into that camp territory, and then you
Mm.
have like the Abbott and Costello meet
I
Frankenstein.
like Abbott and Costello meet
I
Frankenstein, sir.
I
That's a
love it.
great
I
movie.
love it. But it's after that point, once you start getting into the 50s, that
Yeah, yeah,
the Universal monsters lost all their frights. But I mean,
yeah, yeah.
similarly, you start getting like Dracula versus Billy the Kid and stuff like that, and like they're really entertaining movies.
Yeah, yeah. At least they didn't have Kathleen Kennedy calling the shots.
And that's a great segue as well, because I anybody who's listened to this show knows I am not a fan of Kathleen Kennedy. Whenever it drifts into that direction. I've only had a few episodes that we've really talked about Star Wars, but yeah, my views on Kathleen Kennedy once again is that. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure you have more information than I do in regards to it. She was more. I mean, I'll start with George Lucas. He felt so attacked by the fan base that he thought that Disney would be the place that would preserve his legacy, right? And I
Mm.
feel like Kathleen Kennedy was the person, because she had worked with Spielberg and Lucas before, who kind of, I don't want to say manipulated, but kind of manipulated that state of mind to kind of push for that deal. And then she convinced him that she should be put in charge to protect his vision. And none of that vision was protected. Disney went and did whatever they could, and Kathleen Kennedy kind of put her spin on a lot of things, and I feel like it's her influence that has made the sequels as lackluster and mediocre as they have been in some regard.
All right. Well, I'll start with the last thing you said because you're absolutely correct on that, and that all comes from a lack of planning.
Yeah.
Um, and Kathleen can't be 100% blamed on that, but I still am very puzzled as to why an established game plan wasn't laid out. And the problem with it is because Kathleen Kennedy just didn't understand Star Wars at a time when it was crucial to have someone running the ship who understood Star Wars. Kathleen Kennedy was someone who was very liked by George Lucas,
Mhm.
who she had a huge career with Spielberg. She and her husband Frank Marshall established their own production company, but she is just like a good administrator, right? But she's not a great filmmaker, and she's not a great Star Wars person.
Right.
She knew nothing about Star Wars until she became part of the company, and still to this day she defers all knowledge about Star Wars to underlings who were given opportunities to grow within the company because they just happen to know a lot about Star Wars. But they're not great filmmakers. They're not
Yeah.
filmmakers, a lot of them. But they got elevated to executive positions within Lucasfilm and were handed clueless filmmakers in as far as J.J. Abrams goes. J.J. Abrams, obviously a Star Wars fan and someone who understands the nature of filmmaking. But he's not like a Star Wars expert, so he would
Right.
have to go to executives within Lucasfilm for certain tidbits of knowledge. When it came to Rian Johnson, I think Rian Johnson was completely, just thrown to the dogs. He didn't know what the hell he was doing. I still think Rian Johnson is 1000% clueless about Star Wars and absolutely the wrong person to have made a Star Wars film. And it was Kathleen Kennedy bringing in these young flavor of the day filmmakers to work on projects. Gareth Edwards with Rogue One. And Gareth, I think, did a really good job, but Gareth didn't. They told him, Gareth, go make a Star Wars war movie like Band of Brothers. And so Gareth came back with a war movie like Band of Brothers. And they're like, yeah, this is great. Where's the Star Wars? And it was just too gritty, too bloody, too harsh. And
It's a
so that,
war movie.
yeah, well, they weren't clear with him. And again, I think the company on a whole was distracted by relaunching the Star Wars franchise with The Force Awakens. So they didn't know what Gareth was doing, and so he didn't have the leadership. He didn't have people working with him that he really needed to have working with him. So they brought in Tony Gilroy. They were totally clueless about what to do. They brought in Tony Gilroy, and I think they gave some guys at ILM a little bit more of control of that film to get it to where it was able to be released, and people loved it. I loved Rogue One. I
Yeah.
still can't believe that they pulled that one off, but they did. And then, of course, then Solo went completely off the rails. The Boba Fett film was never made. They brought in Josh Trank, fired him. She brought in Colin Trevorrow, fired him from episode 9. So it just seems like this whole idea of taking anything and throwing it at the wall and then passing it off to the next flavor of the month filmmaker to take over was a huge mistake, a massive misunderstanding of how to make Star Wars. And as a result, the box office plummeted for Solo, a film nobody wanted to see, nobody gave a crap about.
That was the one Star Wars movie that came out that I did not go see in theaters. I just waited for it because, there's nothing about that movie that could excite me. And yeah, I mean, it had some cool nods, like, I don't know, spoiler alert, the little Darth Maul cameo at the end. I love seeing it connected to Clone Wars. Like, that was awesome to see that little connection be made. But outside of that, it was just an uninspired movie. Like, it just felt like it was too formulaic. Like, it didn't.
Yeah.
It didn't really rivet you.
It's the one Star Wars film that doesn't promote discussions about really big, deep topics.
Yeah.
It's very surface value. Solo. There's not much underneath the surface. It's what you see is what you get. I think the timing on it was terrible for a couple of reasons. You just killed off Harrison Ford as Han Solo a couple years prior in The Force Awakens. Alden was fine, but he wasn't Harrison Ford. That's his biggest crime. And I think it's fair to critique that. I think that's very fair to critique that. Also, the inclusion of Darth Maul a character who was just killed off the year prior in, oh, spoiler alert, because you haven't seen Star Wars Rebels. Too bad. Yeah, so
Oh, no, Darth Maul probably had it coming. I hope he got chopped in half again.
yeah, I'll leave it to you to watch it. It was anticlimactic, let me just say.
Oh no.
To me, it was. Some people love it, but I don't want to get into it.
All right, yeah, I'll watch it and we'll come back for a later discussion.
That's fine. And so, yeah, I was like, what's Darth Maul doing here? What the hell? And so I felt like he was just kind of squeezed in.
Yeah.
And the thing that really bugs me about Solo is it just doesn't look like a Star Wars film.
Yeah.
It's dark, it's drab. You can't make out all the details. Like when I see a Star Wars film, especially in the prequel era, my eyes are darting all over the frame. You know, I'm looking everywhere in the screen. What's that down in the corner? Oh my God, look back there. It's a dewback, all that stuff.
Yeah.
You have no sense of that kind of rich detail in Solo because it looks muddy. It just looks like somebody barfed all over the final print of the film. And I've been corrected on this many times. Well, the cinematographer was trying to create ambient lighting with lighting devices on the set itself as opposed to using spotlights and things like that. I said, well, maybe he should go back to film school because that's how I shoot iPhone videos, okay? I didn't have to go to film school to learn how to turn on a lamp. Are you telling me the guy just turned on a lamp? That's not good. And the film suffers because of it. It's dark, it's drab, it's depressing. It's depressing. Star Wars is supposed to pop at you with color and detail everywhere all over the screen. I feel that way about certain scenes in The Last Jedi too, where it just kind of looks like there's just a dark filter overall, like a muddy filter. And that to me is not Star Wars. Now, other parts of The Last Jedi look spectacular. I mean, there are parts in that film that look really great. I love the stuff on the island.
Yeah,
What's that?
that throne room fight looked phenomenal.
It's so cool.
That was probably my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. And the showdown with Luke on Crate and all of that. But people get their wind taken out of their sails because Luke is force projecting himself into that battle. I personally have no problem with it because as a Dark Horse Comics fan yourself, you know that Luke was force projecting himself into battle with AT-ATs way back in the early 90s in Dark Empire.
Yeah.
So do you remember that?
Yeah. I mean, I personally had no problem with the idea of force projection being used, but I don't think it was the best avenue for his final stand because I don't know, like, and I talked about this on another episode. I feel like a lot of The Last Jedi could have been fixed with two things. One, you already knew Carrie Fisher was going to pass before the film was released. Mm-hmm. They should have recut the film and edited her in so that she had the final showdown with, flying the ships or doing the light speed into the oncoming. Because it would have given her, well, one, it would have probably made up for the whole Mary Poppins thing earlier, but two, it would have, you knew she wasn't going to be able to be fit into the next film. If you would have had her go out like a boss and then had Luke as the carryover character, it would have then given him his redemption arc that he really needed, and at least would have allowed Rey to have some training so it corrects a lot of the issues people had with her character. Because I get the Mary Sue references. I mean, she hasn't really trained or did that. And I mean, that wouldn't matter if her character had a sense of purpose.
Yeah. Well, she was Palpatine, so she was naturally strong in the Force.
Right. And I don't know. I just feel like that would have been a better way to go than the whole Palpatine angle because I don't know. I was hoping that they weren't just going to reenact the Return of the Jedi with the Rise of Skywalker. I was hoping you were going to have, I was hoping you were just going to have Kylo become the badass that, you feel like he could have been this whole time, but he just never got there.
Yeah. It's the whole, they shoulda, coulda. I
Yeah.
would have, the way I would have done it.
Yeah.
Again, I try to just wrap my head around the Star Wars that is, and not the Star Wars that isn't, because it's just easier that way. I find it very frustrating to rewrite films. And I think that the benefit of having a franchise like Star Wars is just knowing that there's more coming.
Yeah.
There's more Star Wars on the way. And I think we need to kind of train ourselves to let it go if there is an element of Star Wars that doesn't appeal to us individually. I mean, at this point, it's been around for, 40, almost 45 years, 44 years. And it's just going to be natural that we're not going to like everything that they
Right.
throw at us. How vocal can we be? Well, I do say it's important to talk about the things you like and you dislike. It's also sort of hard to just keep hitting, what's that say, beating a dead horse.
Yeah.
I'm not
Well,
saying you're beating a dead horse either. I really enjoy hearing your take on the things they could have done differently. And I don't disagree with you. I think they had the opportunity to fix episode 8 and have Carrie, find an on-screen death that would be beneficial. But Rian Johnson, very close-minded, very selfish filmmaker.
yeah.
He doesn't want to listen to reason. He doesn't want to accommodate anything other than his own vision. And if you ask him about it, he'll say, well, it was what's best for the story. There was no other way to make it. Well, no, there's a million other ways to make it happen. I hear fans talk about it all the time. Maybe if you open your mind a little to that kind of thing, then you would know, Ryan, but you didn't.
Yeah.
I know Ryan's watching this show right now, so I won't hesitate to tell him what I think he did wrong. But it was just the whole approach was wrong. And,
Yeah, and I mean,
you
like
know,
his approach works well in certain genres. Like Knives Out was a phenomenal film. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I mean, as like a classic whodunit, you don't really get those kind of movies anymore. And I
right.
really enjoyed Knives Out. But I mean, I enjoyed what was that? What was the one he did with Bruce Willis? Looper. I
Yeah,
enjoyed.
I like that one too. And
I
again,
enjoyed
you
that one
see
as well.
elements. There are elements in that film which he repeats in The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
The whole concept of Luke destroying Kylo before he rises to evil.
Right.
Luke
Right.
had a premonition. Luke saw a vision. Luke looked deep into Kylo's soul and saw a future of darkness and despair at his hands. And so Luke was compelled, by the Force to go exterminate the threat. And that's the dark side of the Force at work. And a very important thing to note about the Skywalkers is that I think something that's essential about Anakin and Luke is their temptation, their strength in the Force, in the light side of the Force is undeniable, but also their temptation by the dark side is something that is a constant struggle with the
Right.
Skywalkers. They have to hold the dark side at bay at all times. So I think that's the Force compelling Luke to go and kill his nephew in his sleep. That's the dark side of the Force compelling. But again, it goes back to that story in Looper where they're hunting that child who lives on the farm, who the child grows into be a terrible sort of terrorist or something, just an awful. Maybe he goes in office. I can't remember the exact details of what the kid grows into. Let's just say he's president,
Right.
and he was like a really evil guy. And so they had an opportunity via time travel to go back in time and kill him before. I mean, the Terminator is a similar
Yeah. Well, that
premise.
and Dead Zone with Christopher Walken, where he
Yeah.
had psychic, flash that the guy running for president ends up detonating the nuke and causing World War III.
Yeah.
So that premise has been done, and it's been done well. But I mean, I don't know. I just still feel that was it was too subversive for Luke's character, because at his core value, he is the eternal optimist. He's the guy who would never kill Vader.
Mhm.
So I don't know. But once again, you're splitting hairs. What's now canon is canon, and well, unless of course it isn't. So what are your thoughts on the veil of the Force? I know that they said that was introduced in Rebels, correct?
The veil. Oh, is this the world between worlds? Is that what it is?
Yeah, because all the rumors are stating
Yeah.
that they can, or that Palpatine survived, and the rumor is that this was in one of the Abrams cuts where they brought in Anakin to like do the flashback. Not sure if it's true or not,
Yeah.
because that footage has never been surfaced.
Mhm.
But apparently it's that world between worlds, and Palpatine, that's how he was able to survive, is he had one of these dark mirror shards on the final Death Star that he could
Yeah.
like transport his consciousness to. But that was never put in the final draft, but that's something that well, at least that's being tossed around as ideas to expand upon, whether they want to eliminate future movies or just kind of go with a multiverse effect, because I have the feeling, I mean, Marvel's going to have to get there eventually if they're going to keep producing their movies. And I know
Mhm.
that eventually DC is going to get there as well with the
Mhm.
Flashpoint. I mean, they already have in television. But yeah, what are your thoughts on the rumors around that world between worlds and the introduction of different timelines, multiverse stuff?
Whoa. Well, number one, that whole idea of the mirrors. Did you notice that subchamber off of the Emperor's throne room in the crashed Death Star
Mhm.
remains in The Rise of Skywalker? Did you notice that there was mirrors in that room when
Yeah,
Rey walked in there?
yeah. That's why I thought that that scene could have had some validity as being cut in the final one, because that was I don't know. From what I've heard, that was supposed to be one of the subplots that kind of tied in all that together,
Yeah.
how he survived and such.
I, for one, now you didn't see Rebels, but I did. And I did not like the world between worlds concept. I thought it was lazy story writing. I thought it was poor storytelling. Um, and I don't like the idea of the Force being a place you can go.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I've always been very firm on my analysis of the tree cave on Dagobah that Luke enters in Empire Strikes Back. Um, in video games like The Force Unleashed 2, you see the Star Killer visit that tree cave, and he
Mhm.
goes in there and has visions and stuff. And Yoda says that he says that tree, that cave, that place, it's a domain of evil, right? He says that. But I don't think that it is something that would affect anyone who walked into it. Just think it was a place where Yoda told Luke to go to have his vision.
Right.
And that's what Luke had, was a vision. But I don't think the tree cave intensified that vision or promoted it, because Luke says, what's in there? And Yoda says, only what you take with you, meaning that it's all on Luke. Everything that he's going to experience in that cave it's all the baggage he's carrying with him.
Right. It's going
And
in
Luke's
spot.
baggage was his family history, his destiny, all of that stuff. The fact that his father was a Jedi Knight, very uncommon.
Yeah.
Um, so Luke had a lot on his plate when he walked into that tree cave. But I don't think that the tree cave itself was some sort of doorway into the dark side or anything like that. I
Yeah.
don't like the Force being a place you can go. And the world between worlds made the Force a place you can go. It was almost like a cosmic shopping mall filled with these mirrors that you can look into and communicate with people from across the galaxy or from different points in time. And via those mirrors, Ezra pulled Ahsoka to her safety. Spoiler alert. And that, I just felt like, okay, that's just kind of convenient and kind of lazy.
Yeah.
And with that device, you can then go and unravel elements of the Star Wars saga mythology going back all the way to 1977. And I don't like that either. Multiverse, I could probably roll with that maybe a little bit better. I probably could. And I think it would take the burden off of the fan base to continue to maintain this chronology, this canon chronology that has become so twisted and so overwhelming. It gets crushed under its own weight. Again, like I said, that's the biggest problem with Star Wars. That's why George Lucas stopped making Star Wars. He just considered episode 6 to be the conclusion, and that was it. He had bigger plans for it, yes, when he was making the original trilogy, but it was during the period between the release of Empire Strikes Back and the release of Return of the Jedi, where George Lucas's personal life took a turn for the worst. And he was dealing with a lot of pressures and losing a lot of his own humanity by continuing to devote 1000% of his life to this franchise. So he had to pull back. So he drastically altered Return of the Jedi to make it the conclusion of the story. By doing that, he sealed the manhole cover, and he was still down in the sewer, So I think that any ideas that he might have had about expanding the story into episode 7, 8, and 9 got really, he painted himself into a corner when he made Return of the Jedi so final. He made it just so final. He sealed it up perfectly with a nice little bow and everything, and never to be opened. And then when push came to shove and Disney was poking around and he started talking serious numbers with them, he realized that he thought he could get the type of money Pixar got or the type of money Marvel got.
Right.
And he realized that the reasons those two studios got sold at such a higher value to Disney was because they had many projects in the pipeline already. So it was kind of turnkey for Disney to acquire the franchises and then let them continue to roll things out. With Lucas, you'd buy the franchise, but you'd have to start from scratch.
Right.
So George whipped up some story treatments for episodes 7, 8, and 9 to enhance the value of the company and make it more attractive to Disney and net him a few more bucks. So Disney went along with that, and they bought the treatments along with the franchise and gave George a little bit more money. I think it, to the tune of like $500 million more money.
Right. It's not chump change.
No, but I mean, I think George was ready to walk away from the deal, and Bob Iger was, acquisition insane. Bob Iger wanted Star Wars. Because he wanted to build a Star Wars park, and he just saw the dollar signs. You can't blame him. But there were no Star Wars projects in the pipeline. So George then suddenly had these story treatments. So, I mean, really, let's face it, when you want to break it all down that way, you'd have to assume George was starting from scratch, because any concepts he had for episode 7, 8, and 9 were sort of thrown out the window when he decided Return of the Jedi was going to be the end of the franchise.
Right.
At that time. He was going to put it on ice. And so he wrapped it up so perfectly that he destroyed the potential of future stories that he had in mind. Like the other was supposed to be someone else, but it turned out to be Leia. And that was just his way of wrapping the story up. And so you have to wonder, how really fleshed out were these story treatments that George Lucas, he was developing them with Michael Arndt, the screenwriter who did Toy Story 3 and Little Miss Sunshine, the Steve Carell film.
Hmm.
He was working with that guy, and they were hashing out the ideas, some of which actually did make it into episode 7. The idea of Luke being in exile
Yeah.
at some Jedi temple, that was George's. The idea to turn him into a bummer dude who cut himself off from the Force, that was Rian Johnson, because Rian Johnson couldn't figure out any other way to do it.
Right.
I
Well, I
tell
mean,
you right now, I mean, if you're sending Luke off to the first Jedi temple, he's going there for a reason, and it's not to hide.
yeah.
He's in search of some sort of knowledge, some more profound connection to the Force that he could use to enhance himself as a Jedi. But for some reason, it was determined that he went there just simply to hide. And
Well, I
Rian
mean,
Johnson said he couldn't figure out any other way to do it. And there's a good way right there. I just gave it to him.
yeah, I mean, and think about the irony in that he's going to hide and cut himself off from the Force, so he goes to the first Jedi temple. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
It does not. No, it makes
Yeah,
no sense.
yeah. I mean,
The only thing that really kind of helps is that it was a place that was hidden off of the star charts. It
yeah,
was an uncharted area. It wasn't commonly known to the hyperspace navicomputers and all that. So it was a good place to hide, yeah. But I mean, I don't think that's the purpose of it being removed from the general knowledge base of the galaxy. Just so Luke can hide there. No, it was because to protect it. It's
yeah.
an important site, the first Jedi temple. You'd think that the original Jedi Knights would want to protect that location, but you and me, we could talk this all night long.
Yeah.
I know we could, but I'm hearing a dinner bell ringing in my house. So
Actually, I was going to say we are getting to the end of our program. I had
I'm
one
disappointed, though. I am disappointed. We're having a good conversation. We're getting somewhere. So
yeah, well,
if you want to continue this conversation some other time, hit me up.
oh, absolutely, because
Yeah.
I had one last question for you, and this goes to some of the rumors that Disney is looking at poaching, and you mentioned it with Taika Waititi as well, poaching a lot of Marvel talent to kind of take over Lucasfilm
Yeah.
and kind of rejuvenate and reinvent the franchise and what it could be. And we all know Marvel is phenomenal at long form storytelling. They connect they're very consistent from film to film. So what do you do you think that's a good idea? And two, if you're going to bring in these Marvel influences, what sort of talent from Marvel would you like to see take the jump as far as like maybe directors, producers, as well as actors?
Well, so far we've had Jon Favreau make a very successful transition into Star Wars, and he has just been a treasure. I would like to see him actually be in a position where he could extend more authority over the franchise on a whole. We know Kevin Feige has been brought in to executive produce a Star Wars film. What film that is? Is it the Taika Waititi film? I don't know. None of that's really been revealed. I imagine we'll be hearing more in the second half of this year about that stuff. The Russo brothers have been talked about, and I think they would be very interesting because they certainly knew how to create a compelling story based on a lot of mythology that fans have known about for years and years via the Infinity War and all that.
Yeah.
That was very impressive, and they can be very effective with character and character chemistry. I like that. I look for that with the director. That was one of the things that made Irvin Kershner so great, directing Empire Strikes Back. Irvin Kershner was someone who really understood characters and
Oh yeah.
the chemistry between characters.
Yeah, he really brought it out between Han and Leia phenomenally.
Yeah, and Luke and Yoda.
Yeah.
For sure. And so I'm not such a Marvel you know like fanboy, you
Mhm.
know. So it really doesn't matter to me. I'm pretty intrigued by the Taika Waititi. Again, another Marvel guy. When you think of Thor Ragnarok, that's where a lot of us first heard of Taika was
Yeah.
from his his Marvel directorial debut.
And he's proven that he's really good with characters as well, because
Mhm.
Jojo Rabbit was phenomenal. That was
Yeah,
probably one
you
of the
like
best
that one.
films of the year. I like that one quite a bit.
Yeah, they're big fans of that in my house too. They put it on, and I was too tired to watch it, and that can really sour your movie experience. You're too tired, and they put on a movie, and it's a bunch of kids screaming and a bunch of bombs exploding. I'm like, I gotta get out of here. So I have to go back and revisit that. I did see the um, the Dracula movie that Taika did. It's vampires,
Oh,
all
I
the
haven't seen
vampires.
that one yet. I'm gonna have to check that out.
What's the name of that? It's great. I think it was his debut,
Okay.
and it's a take on all the vampire archetypes, and he puts them all together, living together in a house. Like all like from
Oh,
Nosferatu to your more traditional, I want to suck your blood, that
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of. To all of them, it's just to Vlad the Impaler, they're all there.
Man,
It's pretty
I
funny.
really hope they have a Lost Boys hero like 80s biker in there too.
I think they do, but but yeah, that's one worth checking out. And I can't remember the name of the song, like "What We Do in the Darkness" or something like
Oh,
that.
What We Do in the Shadows.
"What We Do in the Shadows." Yeah, it's a TV
Okay.
series now,
Oh,
right?
oh, really? I didn't know that
Yeah,
he did that original movie.
yeah. Check out the original movie. It's a lot of fun. It's just a lot of fun. It's very funny. You like all the characters. It's just great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my recommendation. But yeah, so he's good. So we have this Marvel crossover already in play, and we've already seen great results from Jon Favreau with The Mandalorian. And I just think that if they keep going down that path, they'll have more success, as opposed to going for the quirky auteurs that they're just going to end up firing, like
Yeah.
the yahoos from Game of Thrones. And
After
it's
that
been
last season,
embarrassing.
they should have never been into consideration.
This
They
whole
could
thing's just been embarrassing to watch. And what it's done, going back to Kathleen Kennedy, because I firmly believe Kathleen Kennedy needs to go, because watching all of this stuff and experiencing the last 5 years of Star Wars has been, it's been hard. It's been very hard. And what it's done is something that I can, in my entire 43 years of Star Wars fandom, going all the way back to 1977, one thing that's never really happened to me is I've never really lost confidence in Lucasfilm.
Yeah.
I've lost a lot of confidence in Lucasfilm, in Kathleen Kennedy's Lucasfilm, over the last 5 years. And I firmly believe she needs to step aside and put someone in there who's a little more qualified, a little less agenda driven, and someone who just gets Star Wars. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm in 100% agreement with you on that one. And you know what? Even though I've lost a lot of confidence in Lucasfilm as well, a lot of what they've been doing recently has given me a lot of hope for the future, because primarily the direction they seem to be going is going to be more centered on what traditional fans want, as opposed to what prospective fans may want. But
And we'll see.
yeah. But folks, this has been Jimmy Mack. Check out his podcast, Rebel Force Radio. He's got about 10 different shows on the website now.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, the one that's always in production is the weekly Rebel Force Radio. New episodes come out on Fridays. We'll be revving up the engines for the Mandalorian after show come October. And then there's little bonuses here and there that pop up every once in a while. But
Yeah.
yeah, all the shows are there for the most part. You can find it all at rebelforceradio.com. Of course, we're on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify,
Every
Pandora,
platform that there is.
everywhere. But we got videos on YouTube also. And
Yeah.
our YouTube channel has been a slow build over the past couple of years. And I don't think a lot of people know that we have some cool videos and wacky stuff there, highlights from past shows, etc. And then it's Rebel Force Radio on YouTube. So we'd like to see that grow a little bit because
Yeah.
it's not really up to speed as far as our podcast reach goes. But, you know, we're not in it for the numbers. We just want to share fun, love, passion, Star Wars with everyone. So, and I'm happy I've been able to do that with you, Mr. Fry. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure having you, and great honor. I love talking with guys that are way more knowledgeable about certain subjects than I am. But folks, definitely, if you're watching my YouTube channel and watching this video on YouTube, you might as well just click up Rebel Force Radio. Give them a like, give them a subscribe, or if you're not into YouTube, you're listening to this on your podcasting platform of choice, then make sure to give them a like, give them a subscribe there. And, you know, Disney, I'm pleading with you. Please, 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 if you're going to get rid of Kathleen Kennedy, put Jon Favreau in there.
Yeah, I would like to see
that entire Marvel talent is a pool waiting for you to tap into. Or at least give me a Boba Fett movie directed by Quentin Tarantino. Good night, folks.
Oh, damn.